Hi, I'm Amy Edwards, and welcome to the Edwards Table. This podcast is all about real conversations, the kind that come from life, love, family, friendship, and all the messy, beautiful parts in between. I started this show because I believe in redemption stories and in sitting down together to talk about the things that shape us, heal us, and sometimes just make us laugh. So grab a seat, take a breath, and join me, because there's always room for you here at the Edwards Table. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Edwards Table podcast. My name is Amy Edwards, and I am delighted to have you here. Whether you're a first-time guest or you have been around my table for the past several months that I've been doing this, super excited to have you here. And today, kicking off a very exciting mini-series for the month of March. So that's kind of been the theme last month in February, just kind of talking through the healing process and what that looks like from my perspective and with my story. And then this month, I really wanted to kind of dive into what it looks like for me in terms of what I am still learning, right? Because I'll say this, and I've stolen it from, I'm not quite sure whom, because I've heard it many times from many people, but if you're not learning, you're not growing. And if you're not growing, you're dead. So I feel like we are here on this planet learning constantly, or at least we're given opportunity to learn, right? So there's that. But for the whole month of March, each week this month, I will be jumping into different topics that I am still learning about. And assure yourself, there are so many more than 4. I could probably go on for the year and still not have exhausted the whole list. However, what I'm focusing on for this week is what I am still learning about love. I don't know about you, but sometimes I am very guilty of listening to people and the world around me that may not be the healthiest or the best places to go in terms of what actual love is meant to look like. And I think how that has kind of impacted my life, if you will, would be kind of 3 different areas. So one is receiving love, how I receive it, and how I view people around me receiving love. And then the second would be this whole process of unlearning conditional love. So maybe you're like me and you've had people in your life that have loved you conditionally, which most of us are guilty of, but some of us only love that way. And so just thinking about how to unlearn that part of conditional love. And then finally, what is God's definition of love? So if you've been part of this journey with me, you know that my faith is super important and interwoven into my whole story, what I live and learn through. And so just thinking about, what does that mean? Like, what is God's love? So if you've ever struggled with believing that love could be safe and steady, this is definitely an episode for you. So that struggle is so real for me, talking about it being safe and steady and whatnot. That's definitely been a big struggle for me. And I think given my life's experiences, obviously, just like all of us, right? We all have things that happen in our lives, albeit because of a situation or people, but that shapes very clearly what this whole concept and idea of love is, and then how we view it and how we receive it and all of the things. So in terms of my personal story, if you've not been part of this journey and been on this podcast and listened in, just very quickly, I have a history from my childhood of abuse, and definitely have experienced a multitude of people loving me conditionally in my life. If you really want to dig in, definitely go take a listen to season 1, because I just kind of take a chronological journey through my whole story, and that'll give you kind of some insight as to where I'm coming from a little bit more in detail. But in terms of, kind of what I viewed love as for a very long time, given my circumstances, what I went through as a child, what I tried to make sense of as a teenager and a young adult, and then over the course of years, right? So being loved conditionally definitely teaches us to perform, be fearful, learn how to survive with excellence, there are so many facets that I don't think I was even aware of until more recent years. Partly because I'm a mom, so I have two kiddos, and they're both grown. But like in my parenting experience, that really magnified just how distorted my view of love truly had become. So for instance, I really, really, really struggled with the fact that love was absolutely able to be given and received unconditionally. So when you're taught from a very young age that in order to be loved, you must perform, you must behave in a certain way, right? Or you must look a certain way, or you must carry yourself in a certain way. You must do all of these things, if you will, a checklist, in order to receive love. It very much distorts our view, and it totally wrecked me as a kiddo. I believed also, let me back up. Also, what was going on in my life was I was in a Lutheran school for my elementary years, and church was the Lutheran church that we attended. And so in the Lutheran faith, the way that it gives you information on who you're meant to be, how you're meant to be, and these kinds of things, we worked out of what's called the catechism. It's a book, and there are questions and answers, and the expectation by the 6th grade is that you've learned your catechism and you're able to walk through, what you believe and why you believe it. And I remember vividly in my 8th grade year, our pastor would come in and teach our Bible class to the 8th graders, because that was the highest grade level of my school, and so it was kind of an honor to have him come in and teach. But he and I got very sideways when he was talking about the concept of divorce. He went back into the Old Testament, was pulling a passage out from when God gave the Israelites laws and things of that nature, and talked about, the fact that pretty much everyone should just die if they've had a divorce. Well, at that point in my life, my mom had been divorced twice and was getting ready to get remarried. So you can imagine in a young tween teenage girl's mind when she has a pastor telling her that pretty much her mom is unforgivable and what she's getting ready to do is continue to sin and all of these things. It just really got me thinking. And unfortunately, at that time in my life, I definitely did not hold back when I felt that someone that I cared about was being unjustly talked about or unjustly treated. And so I just really leaned into asking really hard questions that day to my pastor. And I said, well, I don't understand if in the New Testament, when it's talking about, Jesus comes and teaches everyone that he is the way, the truth, and the life, that only through him can you be redeemed and saved from sin and death in hell. that belief in him, asking for forgiveness from your sins, that is what is making your path to heaven. That's how you get there. And my pastor, it was so interesting, not to say that he was telling me I was wrong, but he couldn't explain to me how divorce was, pretty much air quotes, an unforgivable sin. And I don't remember the exact conversation, but suffice it to say, by the time we got to the end of our conversation, I had questioned how the Lutheran Church hosts communion, which if you're not from the church world, this is something that we practice where we pray and it's just a remembrance of Jesus dying on the cross. And so I also struggled at our Lutheran church because if you weren't considered Lutheran, like if you had not become a member of the Lutheran church where I went to church anyway, and this may be different for you all now who are Lutheran, I don't know, but you were not allowed to participate in communion. And again, I went back to what I read in Scripture, and throughout the first 4 books in the New Testament, wherever I learned about communion there, Jesus made it about if you believe in him, not what denomination in church you were. And so I struggled with that. So that was part of this conversation. And then it got to the point where my pastor pretty much landed at there are certain sins that are, he didn't say the word unforgivable, but that was definitely the implication. And so I was very distressed and distraught. I was also not quiet, and I argued back and forth with him to the point that he was red-faced, stormed out of the classroom. My principal had to come in and talk to the class. I also got to talk with the principal and have a conversation there, and then was sat down with the pastor, and we kind of had a truce of he would not push and I would not either. But it was very interesting because unfortunately for me, that just reiterated that love is very conditional. Like if I have to do a certain thing in order to be considered, quote, good enough to go to heaven, or the right denomination of church to go to heaven, or whatever the case may be, that just piled on top of what I already believed about looking a certain way, acting a certain way, being a certain way, doing the right thing, making sure I had the correct tone of voice, eye contact, whatever the case may be, in order to then be approved to be treated with love. And so conditional love for me, huge in my life, a very big one that I have definitely struggled with, and I still am working on to this day to unlearn those old behaviors of what conditional love truly is. And so like where that shows up in my life now as an adult is not nearly as often, but occasionally I'll find myself going back to old habits where there are certain phrases that I can hear that were repeated in my childhood that will just, it's like flip a switch. And it takes me back to being, a little girl again, and feeling inadequate, feeling incapable, feeling like whatever, you're not good enough, you're not doing it right, that's not the right tone of voice, it's not the right phrase, you're not saying the right things, or whatever the case may be. But it will very quickly just kind of flip that switch on and allow those thoughts to start kind of running through my head again. Not a great place to be as you're into your 50s. And so with that kind of, what do I want to say, like that kind of love practice in your life, it is so very easy to then slide into finding a way to trust to love someone, or like allow them to love you in calm and peaceful times. So that is something, honestly, that I always have to wrestle with. So when life feels calm and peaceful, it's kind of chugging along, that is putting me on high alert. Something's about to happen. Someone's about to lose their mind on something. I'm going to have done something to, frustrate or upset a situation or a person, and I shouldn't have said, or it just spirals me into this overthinking, overreacting, over magnifying, trying to just find something, that's going to go wrong, if you will. So whenever I use that word, the words conditional love, right? What I'm saying is love is given when you behave a certain way, and then love is withdrawn when you disappoint. So when I'm talking about conditional love, that's what I'm meaning. So when you're doing what is expected, you get the love. And then when you disappoint people, they take it away. And the unfortunate part about what this does with being loved conditionally and truly believing that love is conditional is it trains our mind and our behavior to become performative, performing things, right? And then also people pleasing, that's a big one. And then another one definitely for me is hiding parts of myself. So performing is what I will say is playing the game, right? So part of what makes me an incredible room reader and people reader is learning how to be in this environment of conditional love. Truly, it's wired me in a way that's amazing. I can tell you by the way somebody exhales how they're feeling. the way sometimes, you get the crinkle on your brow, or how sometimes eyebrows will shift, breathing patterns will change, how people use their hands. So it actually became quite a gift and a talent, and became very useful in really all of my jobs, like being able to read a room and know kind of where people are headed and whatnot. I'm actually really good at it. And it's so funny. I think about the last job I was in, the person I worked for, she and I would laugh about it, because it's like, how do you teach that? Like, how do you teach someone to be able to read the room well and read people well? And I think that's why I always struggle to be able to put it down on a sheet of paper, is because it's become part of how I function as a human being in order to survive. And then also with this whole hiding of myself, I am beyond excellent. I tell people all the time, I am very chatty when I'm around you. I will talk your ear off. But when you walk away from a conversation with me, unless you know me personally and I know you well, you really have not heard anything of value come out of my mouth. And that is very much a protective mode that I go into, and I still do. Even now, I will find myself being very general in how I say something, not giving a clear, concise opinion or a clear, concise thought. So very protective of my heart, very protective of just my life, my story, my people. And so I will give you general bits, but probably something you could either Google, or you could look me up on social media, and you could already have found all of that out. Now, you talk about like how conditional love kind of trained me, and I think many of us, right, who have been loved conditionally. But then you contrast that with what love actually truly is. So love is safe, love is secure, and love is without fear. So when you think about it, what did love look like for you in your house when you were growing up? Can you think back to that time when you felt loved? And maybe you did feel loved always in your home, but when you did feel loved, what did that feel like? And in your childhood, what did you learn that love required? So there's some kind of questions to kind of munch on and chew on for a little bit, think about, mull over. Where and how did you feel that love in your childhood home? And then from that, what did you learn that love required? Because I think about that. I think about, for me, and how love was given was definitely based on performance, how I was performing and reading the room. So knowing kind of what the status of the family was, and was I doing everything I was supposed to do? Being a good daughter, being courteous, minding my manners, keeping things tidy and clean, and those kinds of things. But even more so because the rules of the house were not all written. So we had very clear, concise rules in terms of how we were to behave in our home, but also there were very, very many unwritten rules about the way certain things are to be kept. Everything has a place, and every place has its thing. It's just, anyway, lots of those kinds of unwritten rules. And things that we didn't necessarily talk about, but that was just the expectation set forward in order to have a calm, peaceful household where, I would feel that I was a good girl and I was doing good things. And that was kind of where I landed with what that kind of love felt like. But that was something that I learned very quickly. And as the rules changed, right, the bar, if you will, of the expectation would shuffle. Sometimes it would be higher, other times it'd be lower. And just figuring out how to pinpoint that and keep things moving in the right direction on my end. Now, coupled with the fact that I still was very opinionated, still had a very sassy mouth, still was willing to take a spanking over not saying something, to the point of I would ask, could I get my spanking and then do it anyway? Which I can only imagine the amount of boiling blood that would run through my mom's body when I would ask that question. But it was very much who I was as a child. which is pretty much me now, just now with more of a filter than without the filter. So it would just kind of spill out. And sometimes I was willing to take whatever the punishment would be because it was worth being able to say what I wanted to say. And when I go back to those times and just thinking about even now in my life, what is really, really difficult for me is I can give love really, really well. Like, I think if you were to sit down with Maddie, my daughter, or with my son, or with my husband, John, if you sat down with any of my family, they would tell you I love them and I love them well. But for me to receive love is very difficult. So that kind of comes out in different ways for me personally, but I know if you're like me and you know, you haven't had maybe a lot of experience of unconditional love, or you didn't maybe when you were a child and it just kind of has shaped you as an adult. So for me personally, what that looks like is I have I have along the way struggled with needing people. So relying on other people, for me, very foreign. You should be able to do this on your own. You got to figure it out, whatever. And what's interesting is how God has reshaped that for me has been through hard struggles. So like physically going through something to where I had no choice but to allow someone to help me, or financially going through something to where I had no choice but to allow someone to help me, right? So I think about when we lost everything, there were very close and dear friends, but then there were also strangers who would, help us. So I know I've shared before the story of our Christmas when we lost everything and had to move out of our home and into another one we had built but wasn't completed. And it happened to be, we had to be out of our house on Christmas Eve. And so over the course of the next probably solid year, we were teetering on the edge of, do we have enough money for groceries? Do we have enough money for medicine? Because at that time, Quinn had asthma and was on a lot of medicines to keep him healthy. And there were times where I had to just very graciously say thank you and not push away the kindness that people were showing for me, or be ungrateful because they were trying to love on us. And like I said, for me, that was really, really hard. I'm very much someone who does things independently. And so for me, I thought, well, that's not loving me, that's pitying me, and I don't want pity. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's definitely the kind of wonky way of my thinking, because of this whole formation of my thoughts when it comes to being loved conditionally versus someone truly just loving me. And this is another interesting one I think about, is like the fear of being seen. So it's interesting. I have always done things in terms of being on a stage or in some sort of performance situation. So I was a competitive ice skater for years of my childhood. And when I decided to walk away from that, I jumped into sports and I did theater. But what's interesting is by doing those things, yes, I was in front of people. However, I didn't have to be myself. So truly, I wasn't being seen as Amy. I was being seen as the volleyball player, the basketball player, the floor hockey player, the girl in the play, the girl in the musical, whatever. But it wasn't truly seeing me. So it was actually a very beautiful place for me to hide, if you will, from people. I didn't have to really answer for anything other than my performance. And that I was really good at. As long as I knew what the expectation was, I would work really hard to be the very best that I could be in that. And when I wasn't talented, but still was capable, so like for instance, basketball. I was never a talented basketball player, but I was capable. Like I could play. I was never gonna be a starter or anything crazy like that, but I could go out there and give up my 5 fouls, didn't have a problem at all doing that, kind of a thing. So it helped kind of keep me invisible, if you will. And it was not until I was much further along in life, and I think partly becoming a mom, that pulled that curtain down, if you will, because if you ever want to know the truth about yourself or a situation, ask a child. They will not hold back. They will tell you straight up what it looks like and how it is. But what's so interesting is even now having conversations with my kids who are in their 20s, even now having conversations with their memories of me and how I was as their mom when they were young, they didn't see all that I saw in terms of how I thought I was failing, and I was I wasn't a Pinterest mom and all of the things. But they saw me show up. I was at all of their performances and activities. I was here to tuck them in at night, and we had dinner every night together, or most every night, breakfast in the morning, taking them to and from school. So I was around. I was also available when they needed me. So if you are a parent, definitely teenagers are going to come stalk you at 10 to 11 p.m. to start a conversation that needs at least bare minimum 45 minutes to be able to get through all the things. And if you're like me also, by 10, 11 o'clock at night, you are just trying to walk to your bed and put yourself in it. So, yeah. But I think that's a beautiful thing, right, of learning how to be seen, definitely parenting, but also marriage for me. Being married to John has helped me not stay invisible, if you will. That's also been very beneficial to me. And I think the other part of, it being easier for me to give than to receive love is this whole fear of disappointment. If there's one thing that absolutely wrecks my heart, it is to know that I've let someone down. In a very unhealthy way, I take it to heart. I put very, very, very heavy pressure on myself because of just the way that I learned how to receive love as a child. Having an abusive father, you do whatever it takes to keep yourself out of harm's way. And sometimes it's allowing things that shouldn't happen to you to happen. And then there's no fighting and fussing. It's interesting too, with that, how very much it was ingrained in me not to let people down. To the point of hearing the phrase, who was right, who was wrong, who's the adult, who's the child. But it was ingrained in me, not to let others down, to do whatever it took to keep people happy, if you will. Which again, that's not love. That's not allowing a person to be themselves and to treat them carefully and compassionately and gently, allowing them a place to be safe, allowing them a place to be seen and a place to be heard. So I've talked about, some kind of heavy side stuff, right? When it comes to love, love shouldn't be what I've explained, and I shouldn't feel the way that I feel or felt the way that I felt, So thinking about kind of the way that my thought process and my heart was shaped from being loved conditionally. The great news is I have been in a very long process of learning when it comes to letting that view of conditional love go, and to be able to replace that with what true love should look like, should feel like, should be like. And let me tell you, unlearning old things that were ingrained in you as a child is not easy. It's awkward. It's scary. It's gross. Who wants to do that? Who wants to go and upheaval the whole of your past, shake out all of the things that are not good, and then have to find a way to plug that in with what's right? It's not easy, but goodness, is it so much healthier and feels so good to actually be able to receive love. So in terms of what that looks like how do you unlearn conditional love, good heavens? Well, for me personally, productivity is a big deal. So I am someone I even struggle with this now, but I'm much more mindful of it. And I stop myself before I start going way down the track of beating myself up. And that is being able to be still and relax is not considered lazy. I'm not lazy because I lay on my couch and watch mindless television for a little bit, or pick up a book and read that, or rearrange my schedule so that I can grab a 20-minute power nap before I jump on to my next task for the afternoon or whatnot. And let me tell you, that probably is top of my list of things that I still, at 51 years old, still struggle with, letting those old voices creep back into my head, right? So there's that. Another one is this assumption that when you mess up or make a mistake, that love is going to disappear. So having to find a way to understand that. And also, let me pause and say this. Not every single person in your life is going to love you unconditionally all of the time. It is only Jesus himself who can do that because he's perfect. We're still human beings. We're still going to make mistakes. I get that. However, when we love someone, truly love them, when they make a mistake, not to say we don't get angry, not to say that we don't, get furious and it really hurts us, and it might take some days or maybe even weeks, a couple of months to where we process through what they have done, because it might have been a really big mistake that they made at or toward us, right? And so it might take us a little time to work through it and to be able to come back to the table and have a conversation to then be able to move forward. But reality is that one mistake, or many mistakes even, it doesn't mean that we can't still love that person. And then I think the third thing that I think about in terms of like unlearning these old patterns, right, is allowing someone to love me. Like, not this woman who has been created by social media or by what the world tells her to be, or changing how I talk, how I react, how I behave, how I look or carry myself or whatever else. Like, to truly be able to be who I am and then to be loved by other people is definitely a part of this unlearning process for me. And so, I mean, you all know, I'll say this over and over again, this unlearning old habits, or old beliefs that we have about love. I think we have to constantly be telling ourselves this is a journey, not an event. It's just like with anything else in our lives. If we want to get healthy, eating one salad is not going to do the trick, or eating carnivore for one day is not going to just take care of everything. Like, it is a process to purge unhealthy habits out of your diet, unhealthy foods out of your diet, and then to add in healthy habits such as exercise, drinking fluid that is clear like water or tea, like all of those kinds of things. And so I think whenever I talk about my journey of what it looks like and then healing from it, and then what am I learning from it, well, that everything is a process, y'all. It is taking it one day at a time. Sometimes it's taking it 1 minute at a time or 1 second at a time, because I will say on the healing journey, it's very much like grief in that it will pop up in the most random, or at least it feels, the most random of times, and it can teleport us back into exactly what we are trying to fight so hard to grow from. It literally is like, can be a time machine. And so I think entering this, learning how to unlearn old habits because of being loved conditionally, we have to constantly be giving ourselves grace and second chances, because we're going to need lots and lots of them along the way. And then I think the other thing is that we have to be very intentional. So for me personally, I have to literally rephrase these ideas that will come through my head that are unhealthy, that are lies, that are not, absolutely not helping me be the best version of myself possible. And absolutely just completely changing that narrative, if you will, in my head. And so, for instance, I have a habit of really going down a path of questioning myself. I very much overthink things. I will think through situations from in the past or recent past, and I'll just mull through them 100 different ways and think, oh, well, it's going to be, this or that or whatever the case may be. And if so-and-so says these words and then I say those words, and then, it's one, it's unhealthy. Two, it's absolutely ridiculous because I cannot predict, nor can I confirm, one, what somebody's going to say, two, what they're even thinking. So, I mean, it is so counterintuitive. It's so counterproductive. But when I get into those moments where I start really, coming through and getting on what I would call a spiral that is just a very quick downward spiral, and I start saying very negative, nasty things to myself, I will do this out loud. I literally will say, Amy Lynn, we are not talking that way. That is not the truth, and we're going to replace it with this. So, for instance, I'll give you an example of one that I do, and that is going back to my faith always, is that I will I'll go to my Bible and I'll actually pull out an actual scripture. But if I'm not able in the moment, maybe I'm in the car, or it's night and I'm trying to sleep, or John's already asleep and I'm trying not to, flick on lights and whatever. But I will recall parts of verses. And it is so powerful for me to do that, because if you go into the Bible from Genesis all the way to the book of Revelation, which is the whole Bible, start to finish, there are countless passages in there that talk about who God is and what love is. And God is love. Like literally, there is no, there's nothing in between. It's what is God? He's love. Like that is his definition, or part of the definition of who he is. And so when you think about it and you start looking at all of the different verses in scripture, so like in the Old Testament, for instance, and I think it's Genesis, but please do not quote me because I clearly don't have a Bible in my hands. But just talking about, yeah, it is Genesis, because it's very early on in the first few chapters where he is, the story of the creation is shared and how he created everything, right? And he says when he creates everything except for humans, he says that it is good. But when he creates humans, he says it's very good. Now, in English, unfortunately, we have a very lazy language, y'all. Because if I'm honest, if you go back and you are able to read in Hebrew or in Latin, it's just beautiful how the languages work. We here tend to be more literal translators, and a lot of languages across the globe are maybe single words or short phrases, but in our language, it would take us almost a sentence to describe. And so when you talk about God being, or God describing the creation as good, and that the creation of man and woman very good, it's that it is very powerful that him creating us is something that he delights in. He's proud of. He loves that we are his creation. And not only that we're his creation, but he loved us so passionately and so much that he created us in his very own image, which is mind-blowing and mind-boggling. And don't get too stuck in the weeds there, because I already know we got all kinds of different skin tones, hair color, eye color, all the things, features, shapes, and sizes, and all of that. But the beautiful part is no matter who it is that you're talking about, that person is also created in God's image. And so you think about that God loved us so much that he created us not only to look like him, but he created us with a capacity to love not as he does because we are unable, unfortunately, due to sin, but he created us with the capacity to love like he does. And to be able to experience things on earth from our perspective, he gave us this as such a gift, right? He gave us the gift of companionship and being able to create new life and to have thoughts and ideas. And more so than any other creation on this planet, we also have a heart that feels, and we have a brain that not just thinks but rationalizes, and it enables us to do incredible things. So like, loves us so much, right? And I think too about the fact that he knows us, personally knows us. And there's a passage that says that he knew us before he knit us inside of our mother's womb. Now, again, it's really easy to get way in the weeds of trying to explain and answer the question why or how, or questions, why, how. And when you get to that place, like sometimes I can too, the best thing to do is just take a deep breath, because having faith and trusting in God, sometimes you just have to have faith past knowledge. Ugh, I know that's not fun, but it's necessary because we as humans cannot fathom God. We can't wrap our wee little minds around him. We can't wrap our wee little minds around who he is, how he does things, why he does things. But what we can wrap around our minds around is his word. And I think that's what's so powerful about going into the Bible and really reading what he says about his creation. So he knows the number of hairs on our head. He knew us before he knit us in our mother's womb. He planned us on purpose. Like, there's a divine plan and purpose for each of our lives. And I just think that is truly, so when we think about love and how much God loves us, right? That's just the creation of us. That doesn't even talk about John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have life everlasting. Don't ask me what version of the Bible that's from. I'm sure I mashed up a couple of different versions in the wording, but the gist of it is this. God so loved the world. The world is all people, not one people group, but everyone. You, me, your neighbor, someone who's 100 miles away from you, 1,000 miles, all the way across the globe. He loved it. He loved the world. He loved all people. So much so that he sent his son Jesus to this earth to die on the cross and then to be resurrected, to overcome sin, so that we can now have not only a relationship with God here on earth, but then we can spend eternity with him in heaven. And I don't know if you've studied a whole lot about religion. I actually have. And there is not another religion that has ever been to this point where you have a relationship with the Creator. And I think that is so beautiful, that the Creator of the heavens and the earth, of my fingerprints, my accent, and all the things, wants to have a relationship with me. And so you talk about love and what God's love truly looks like. It's personal, it's very intentional, and it's absolutely gorgeous, because he also tells us in the New Testament he'll never leave us. Well, he tells us in Old and New, he'll never leave us, he'll never forsake us, which means his love for us cannot go anywhere. The only way that God's love, we don't maybe feel it or experience that feeling, is because we choose to walk away. We choose to say, no, God, I've got this. I'm doing it. I don't need you. It's not him walking away. It's us turning our backs on him. And there's not another deity that does that. None. And no, don't at me in the comments. Well, you can, but I'll walk you through and talk you through where I am on that too. But there is no other little g God out there that wants to have a relationship with you like the God of the universe, Yahweh, wants to have with you. And I think one of the most beautiful pictures that I have of God, for me personally, because of kind of where I come from and what I've learned along the way, is this image of him sitting on some steps and me sitting next to him and him having me lay my head down on his knee and just stroking my hair and just talking to me, listening to me as I talk to him, and having a one-on-one conversation, just the two of us. That no matter what I say, if I'm crying and I'm angry and I'm cussing and I'm pitching a fit, he doesn't quickly like jump up and walk away from me angry because I said a bad word, or angry because I questioned if he truly loves me, or angry because I didn't stand, sit, kneel, do a sign or whatever. None of that. He doesn't ever walk away. He remains very steadfast, meaning right there. He stays. Again, it's us and our decision of whether or not we come to him and allow him to love on us that way, or if we put our hand up and turn our back and say, no, I got this and I'm going to do it my way. And it's unfathomable to me to think of a father who loves us so dearly and so deeply that he won't go anywhere. He will never stop like loving us ever. Yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's really beautiful and I'm very thankful for. And I think, where I am right now in my life, it's that surrendering back to him everything and just being reminded that he loves me today, he loved me yesterday, and he will love me tomorrow. Not because I have done anything or will do something or anything like that, but because that's just who he is. When I say he is love, he truly is, and that's truly how he feels about every single one of us, all of us whom he has created, right? And I think what is so beautiful about God's love is because it is all-encompassing of our entire being, right? That is what reteaches us what love truly is. That is what fills those gaps and holes in our heart that people have pulled out or ripped apart because they've loved us conditionally. God can fill in all of that, and he does when we ask him to. He will come in and just wash through us and mend us and make us whole again. He truly is the only one that can do that for any of us. And I think too, with that as our foundation of what love is, it then speaks to us on how to give and receive love, which is a very nice gift, because if you have a very skewed view of what love should be versus what love actually is, it's very easy to fall back into those old habits of lying to yourself, of thinking that there's a human being on the planet that's going to be able to love you perfectly. And also, not only would they be able to love you perfectly, but also be able to repair old wounds. There's not a person that can do that. Only God can do that. So in closing this week, I just want to leave you with a couple of thoughts and a few questions that have been helpful for me as I'm trying to kind of continue to unlearn conditional love and truly learn what love is, not only to give, but definitely to be able to receive. So starting off, just think about this for a moment. Where did you learn what love is? So think back about when you were younger. Where did you learn what love is? And then the second part to that is, are you still living by that definition? Now, let me also say, maybe you had a very healthy childhood and you're just here for the fun stories, fabulous. God bless you if that is your case, and I hope so. I know there are some of us out there that that's not the case, but for some, I know that is. But think about where you learned what love is, and unhealthily, if it is, are you still living by that definition? And I think there's so much hope in no matter where you are on this journey, no matter where we are, I should say, because I'm on it too, y'all, is that we can let God redefine love for us. And the other part to that is that there are people out in the world that are maybe currently in our lives, or maybe we haven't even met them yet, but there are safe people out there who do know how to love well, and learning how to allow people to love us again is definitely something that we can do with God's help. So just a couple of thoughts. Love doesn't have to be earned. It definitely does not need to hurt, and it absolutely does not have to disappear. These three things for sure are ones that I am continuing to learn about love. So with that, I'm going to close this out for today. Thank you so much for joining me here at the Edwards table. I'm so glad you grabbed a seat and hopefully a good snack along the way. In the meantime, be sure to tune in next week. We're going to continue talking about, in this month of March, all the things I am still learning. And I definitely don't want you to miss next week's episode. It's going to be a really good one. Y'all have a great week ahead, and we'll see you next time.